That's why I like this fly to overhead movement, because it not only works on the retraction, but also the upward rotation of our shoulder blades. Hey guys, it's Corey from Redefining Strength, and today I want to talk about the 5 back exercises you should be doing, but probably aren't. While we all tend to go to the bent over row, the lat pull down, the pull up as the must-do moves for our back, it's really key that we include some other accessory lifts to make sure we're getting more out of our back training. Because all too often we let ego get in the way with those moves and we just focus on lifting heavier weights. We're not actually focused on what muscles are working. And that can not only lead to aches and pains, but it can also hinder us from really getting the back aesthetic results that we want. Because a strong back is also a sexy back. So if you want to sculpt your back, you have to make sure that your back muscles are actually working correctly. And a lot of times when we do those heavy lifts, we get so concerned with how much weight we can move, how many reps we can do, that we aren't focused on actually what muscles are working. That's why I wanted to share 5 amazing moves that serve as accessory lifts to those big compound lifts and will make sure your back is actually working correctly. So what are those 5 moves? Exercise number 1 is the bent over back shrug. So this isn't your usual sort of shoulder shrug where you're working your upper traps. This is to work on scapular retraction and actually make sure that your upper back is working. A lot of times when people do bent over rows, they end up feeling their lower back, or they bounce the weight to try and use heavier weights for more reps, or they actually feel their biceps working. They're not actually moving their shoulder blades to engage their upper back correctly. So to take out any of the ego in the weights, to take out the biceps trying to compensate, to even take out using that bounce, I love using this bent over back shrug. Because when you do this movement, the whole exercise is just focused on scapular retraction. To do the movement, you're going to hinge over as if you're doing a bent over row. I like using dumbbells for this because you can start with a neutral grip. It also allows you to focus a little bit more on each side and make sure that you're correcting any imbalances. So as you bend over with the weights hanging down, just as if you're setting up for a bent over row, instead of doing any elbow drive back towards the ceiling, all you're simply going to do is pinch your shoulder blades together. This is how you initiate that back row and make sure your back is actually working. If you can get this movement down and really strengthen this movement, when you go to do your bent over rows, you're only going to be stronger and be able to move more weight. So by focusing on this initial pull and this initial engagement of your back, you're going to improve your other lifts and you're going to help yourself prevent neck, shoulder, and even upper back aches and pains. If you want to make sure that your back is strong for bent over rows and you're actually correctly engaging the muscles between your shoulder blades and not just pulling with your arms, include bent over back shrugs as part of your accessory work. They'll really help you make sure that you're focusing on what you should be feeling to initiate that pull with your back. Exercise number 2 is the chest supported row. If you've ever felt your lower back during rows, if you tend to get a little ego in the weights and bounce the weights to try and get more up, this move takes all that out of the equation. Because your chest is supported by the bench, it's easier to protect your lower back, and you can't use momentum and bounce the weights up. This is a great way to really isolate your upper back and really work on strengthening those muscles where you can't compensate in any way. To do the chest supported row, it is best to have an incline bench. You can do it with a flat bench, but you might find that you're not able to fully extend your arms. However, you can still work on that scapular retraction and you won't be able to use momentum. With your chest supported against it, you can use either a barbell or dumbbells to perform the row. The key is having that chest really supported against the bench so that you can't use any momentum, and also that serves as a support for your lower back. You'll then row your elbows down and back towards your hips and back towards the ceiling as you row the weights up. Because you can use either dumbbells or a barbell, you can really use a variety of grips to make sure that you're targeting your upper back and those muscles of your back in different ways. With the underhand grip, you might work your lats a little bit more, versus an overhand grip, you might target your upper back muscles more. But you can use a variety of grips and even the neutral grip if you use dumbbells. Again, the dumbbells have that advantage of being more unilaterally focused so that one side doesn't compensate like it might during a barbell row. The chest supported row is great if you struggle with your lower back engaging during the bent over row, and it also allows you to take any ego out of the equation and really isolate that upper back. So if you aren't using this accessory lift, I recommend you start including it, as it's a great way to really focus on that back and strengthening it without any momentum. Exercise number 3 is the single arm hinge lat pushdown. This is a great move if you want to work on your back strength, whether you want to improve your deadlift or your pull-ups or even your lat pull-down. It's a great way to work on scapular depression, so pulling that shoulder blade down towards your back hip pocket. It strengthens not only your lats, but also your lower traps. That hinge position is especially key if you do want to work on your back strength for your deadlift, because that hinge position is mimicking that hip hinge you'll use during the deadlift and engaging your lats, especially at that end range of motion, to really stabilize the bar so you can have a stronger pull off the ground. Even if you're working on just your scapular mobility and stability to improve your pull-ups or your lat pull-down, this is a great accessory lift. I also like this move because it's a unilateral exercise. When we focus on each side independently, it allows us to not only correct imbalances, but also make sure that each side is working as it should be. A lot of times we get distracted during bilateral movements and we can't focus on whether or not each side is doing the work it should. But during the unilateral movement, we can focus on each side independently. I also really like using the band for this movement because it applies more resistance at the end range of motion when we're actually strongest. So as you push the band down, the resistance increases to make it more challenging for our lats where the lat is actually strongest. When you do the single arm hinge lat pushdown, make sure that you're pushing down on the band with your back. It's really easy to start to push with our arms and let our shoulders shrug, but you want to make sure to keep your chest wide and your back engaged and really push down on the band, thinking about using your back to initiate the push. As you push down, think about your shoulder blade actually moving down towards your back pocket. This is a great way to make sure that you're working on that scapular depression and that you're not just overusing other smaller muscle groups. Really focus on unshrugging your shoulders during the movement and focus on feeling your back as you push down. Exercise number 4, the single arm bent over fly. I love using resistance bands and again, using a unilateral move to really strengthen the back. And I think that no back workout is complete if you don't have one accessory move that's at least a fly. This not only works on your posterior delt, but all of the muscles that stabilize and control your shoulder blades to retract them, which is key if you want to improve your rows. Using this bent over single arm fly, you can work on not only the muscles of your upper back, but even your posterior delt. With this hinge position, you're going to want to fly your arm out to the side. Make sure that you do keep your elbow soft. While you want to play around with the amount of elbow flexion you include in the movement to find the right balance for you to actually work your back, you do want to make sure that you're not actively flexing and extending at your elbow during the movement. You don't want to change this into an elbow extension flexion movement, but actually focus on retracting your shoulder blades toward your spine. So you want to think about initiating the movement from moving your shoulder blade towards your spine and actually engaging your back. Make sure you don't shrug your shoulders during this movement and really focus on initiating that pull with your back. I love using the band for this movement because it applies more resistance at the top of the fly where you're actually strongest. You can also use the dumbbell. Just make sure that if you do use a dumbbell, you don't bounce off the bottom. I know it can be really tempting to use momentum when we're using dumbbells in the bent over fly, and using the resistance band can prevent us from doing that, especially when we have that unilateral focus. Exercise number 5 is the standing band snow angel. If we want to have a strong and sculpted back, we need to make sure that we work on our scapular mobility and stability. We need to include prehab movements that aren't about loads, but more about what we actually feel working and working our shoulder blades through a range of motion. That's why I like this standing band snow angel. This move is not only a back fly, but includes an overhead component. It works on not only scapular retraction, but even upward rotation of our shoulder blades. I know we get really scared of any sort of shrugging or overhead movement sometimes because of all the forward flexion we sit in. We can even become scared of pressing movements. But we need to learn how to control these movements and actually have proper scapular mobility during them. That's why I like this fly to overhead movement, because it not only works on the retraction, but also the upward rotation of our shoulder blades. To do the standing band snow angels, you'll want to anchor a band around a pole or in a doorway. You'll then perform a standing fly facing the anchor point, so pulling your arms out at shoulder height. Make sure that when you do that fly, you're initiating the pull with your back. You don't want to just pull with the back of your shoulders or your arms. You actually want to feel your shoulder blades come towards your spine. Then holding in this retracted position, you want to move your arms slowly overhead. As you lower back down and come back to shoulder height, you'll then move back forward and release the fly. You want to make sure that as you move your arms overhead, you're keeping your chest pressed out and your shoulder blades retracted. You don't want to start to round forward. Think more about time under tension with this movement over adding heavier loads. This isn't a move meant to be loaded down with really heavy loads. It's more about really feeling those muscles work and working to control your scapular movement. So if you want to get more out of your back training, start using these 5 moves in your accessory work even after your compound heavy barbell bent over row or your pull-ups or your lat pull down. If you like the video, make sure to like it, comment below if you have any questions, and subscribe. We're posting new videos each week.